Welcome to So Very Easy. My name is Laura. And have you ever run out of fabric for binding a quilt and you really just don't want to use another fabric? Well, I have a very simple way of binding a quilt, and we only need 1-inch strips of fabric. Now, this is definitely a different way of binding a quilt, but it is also probably one of the easiest ways to bind a quilt. This particular method of binding a quilt only needs 1-inch strips of fabric, and the strips of fabric do not even need to be joined together. This is a great opportunity to use up little pieces. So we can cut our strips at 1 inch with a rotary cutter, or we can use pinking shears. I love the look of pinking shears, so I will be using those. So I will need to draw my 1-inch lines. Once I've drawn the lines, I'm just going to cut them out. And you can see I'm not being overly careful, but I do want that 1-inch strip. So I will need enough of these little pieces to go all the way around the quilt, but we're not joining them. But we will need to take that 1-inch strip, fold it in half, and press them. So we will end up with a pile of strips just like this, and these will go around the quilt. And the binding that we're making is called a raw edge binding. These little folded 1-inch strips are going to go around the outside of the finished quilt. This is a quilt that I made, which I call my I Spy in Bubbles. And this is a great project to do this raw edge binding because the appliques are also raw edge. Along the edge of the quilt, I did do 1 or 2 rows of a very tight top stitch. That's just going to keep the layers of the batting together and helps prevent that fabric from shifting. I will now be able to take these little strips, open them up, and where that fold is down the center is going to go along the edge of the quilt. So that fold will go right along that edge. If you find you have too much bulk here, you can do a row of zigzag just to compress that down. But when we have this over, we're going to be able to use a 1/4-inch foot and stitch all the way down. So we're going to be getting that top layer and the bottom layer at the same time. When we come close to the end of the strip, we'll take a second strip and just overlap those edges, match the fold along the edge, and continue stitching. When we come to the corner, we're going to be able to stitch this down, stop, and turn the corner. So I'll bring this to my Bernina and I'm going to show you how to stitch this down and turn a corner. So this fold is going to run right along that edge, and we need to stitch a 1/4 inch in. I will need to overlap that fabric. I just want to match up that edge and stitch right over top. We need to continue stitching until we come right to the edge. I'm going to stitch right off, right to that very edge, and then stitch down. So I'm stitching a big L. Pick this up, turn it, and stitch off right along that edge. And remove that quilt. So we have that 1/4 inch, we've stopped, and we've gone down. This little stitch down is going to help turn that mitered corner. Open that up and just pull that fabric to the side, and it will automatically do a mitered corner. We need to pull those 2 sides apart and match up that edge. So that little stitching is along the back. So this will come up, and that's the back. And that's going to be the same for the front. So that little stitching is in here. Back stitch a little bit here and continue stitching down. And you can always use some little clips to hold that while you're stitching. We are going to continue to stitch down, and you can use this to hold that and push it right against the edge as you're stitching. When I come to an end, slide that over, have those edges meet, and stitch. Put that clip back on and continue sewing and sliding that clip. So you're going to overlap either on the top or underneath. When we come to that corner, we're going to stitch, go down, fold over. That's all there is to this binding. And the area where we start and finish, we just overlap. So let's look at that corner again. We've stitched down, we've stopped, and have stitched right off. We will open this up and just slide it over. Put a clip to hold it out of the way. We can already see that this wants to go into that angle. So we have that front wanting to go over and the back. So I just want to anchor this stitch and continue stitching down. So here is that corner. It ends up being a 45 on the front and on the back. And when it's all done, we have approximately a 1/4 inch of a raw edge on both the front and along the back. Those seams have overlapped at the beginning, the end, and throughout the entire project. So not only is it just 1 inch folded over, they can be small pieces. So we can use up a lot of little fabrics to finish off this binding. This is what the binding looks like after you've put it in the wash machine and the dryer. And I did put it with a big fluffy towel. Some of the fabrics are going to have a softer edge than others, but it all does have a very pretty soft look. And it does go really nice with this raw edge applique. So that raw edge binding is really quick and easy. We start with that 1 inch piece of fabric. You can cut it with pinking shears or just do a straight cut. It takes such a little amount of fabric that even if we don't have that much, we probably can find enough scraps to put it around. It has a very soft and pretty look, and it definitely serves the purpose. Would I put it on an heirloom quilt? Well, maybe not, but something like this is really a lot of fun. I'll put a link in the description if you do want to check out my I Spy quilt. And as always, thank you for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe and come on back. Let's see what we're working on next time in the sewing room. Bye for now.